If you have recently received a refusal on your immigration application, you're always wondering, what is the next step? What can I do about it? And a lot of times on the platforms, on the forums, you will be told then you can apply for a reconsideration. So what is this reconsideration? That is what this video is all about. Now, reconsideration basically is you requesting the visa officer to reconsider their decision, therefore hoping and praying that they this time consider the decision or make the decision in your favor. But it's not as easy or simple as it sounds, and more importantly, a lot of people confuse this subject and actually make a bit of pullout out of it. A reconsideration request can be made, and ideally should be made, only in the situation where you are absolutely certain that the visa officer has made an error in fact or law when adjudicating your application. What this basically means is that if you are aware that when deciding upon your application, when making the decision, the officer failed to consider a specific document or information that you had already provided, or if you know for a fact that the officer did not apply a certain regulation, certain law that you may be aware of or you may come to know of in your application, therefore refusing your application incorrectly or by error or by lack of understanding or knowledge or awareness of that information. Now, this is the situation where reconsideration absolutely makes sense, and in most cases, in these situations, reconsideration request is also accepted. And you will know of a lot of situations where the officer has then reopened the application and then gone about and making a decision, and this time probably a favorable one. How do you make a reconsideration request? Well, you use a web form in order to make a reconsideration request. So in the web form, you will simply address it to the program manager. You will say this is a specific request for reconsideration of the decision, and then you will go about preparing a detailed letter of explanation highlighting the areas under which you are now aware that your application was refused and why it shouldn't have been refused under those conditions. You can not provide any new document in a reconsideration request. However, you may provide a previously submitted document with this request, highlighting that this document, this information was already provided and the officer inadvertently has missed this information. So this is how you can make a reconsideration request. There is no specific timeline. I also know a lot of people who make these requests are then wondering, will I get a response in a week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months? Because this is not a standard process in the whole application, therefore there is no specific SLA, service level agreement, or a timeline that you can get a response or you should expect a response. However, in most cases that we have seen, if there was a substantial reason under which your application should have been reconsidered, then the officers tend to reopen your applications quite promptly. We have seen that in several PR applications. We have seen that in several temporary residence applications where the officers have taken note, have accepted your reasoning, your justification, and then have reopened the application, and this time in the decision being in your favor. Lately, due to social media, everybody pushing for reconsideration requests, it basically is now come to be known as a go-to option in case you get a refusal, which is wrong. And the reason why I'm saying wrong is because if you think just because you got a refusal and if you ask for reconsideration, officer is going to do it, it doesn't really work like that. Also, in several PR applications, if your application is rejected under R10, R10 is section 10 under the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations, where you are expected, you are supposed to provide, it's your responsibility to provide a complete application with all the information, with all the documentation. And if you have missed out on any of the documents which was mandatory for your application, then in this situation, officer has no obligation to ask you for another document or to ask you for that particular missing information or document, and therefore will reject your application. And in such situations, reconsideration is not an option because it was your fault, not officer's fault, to have not prepared a complete application. So R10s, if you get a refusal or rejection under that usually doesn't work for reconsiderations. However, if your application has been assessed under A11.2, that is the assessment criteria, and in that the officer has failed to identify or failed to deal with a provided document which had all the information, this is regards to your PR application, express entry, even non-express entry in some cases, then in this cases, a reconsideration request makes sense. If it's a temporary residence application, again, for example, right, let's take some examples. For example, you made an application for spouse open work permit. You are a person who's studying a 16-month master's in an eligible DLI in Canada, and therefore you are eligible for a spouse open work permit. Now, your spouse open work permit application is refused, where the officer says your application is being refused because the job that you are doing does not meet the NOC eligibility criteria. Huh? You would wonder? Well, definitely calls for a reconsideration request. Or the officer says, well, you are studying in an institution which is not eligible for a spouse open work permit. Again, you go, huh? And again, it calls for a request for reconsideration. Let's say you've provided a complete set of documents for the proof of funds, including the letter from the bank, the 6 months bank statements. You've provided all the details with regards to your liabilities. And in spite of that, the application has been refused, lacking funds in your application or citing that there is a lack of funds. Well, again, if an application is refused because of funds, a PR application, then procedurally, there is a process of procedural fairness whereby you, being the applicant, should have been given an opportunity to address this concern of the officer. Therefore, the officer should have sent you a request for procedural fairness, and because the officer did not, and therefore now you have a good opportunity to request for reconsideration, highlighting that you were denied procedurally, as per the procedural fairness, an opportunity to address the concerns of the officer. So this primarily comprises of what a reconsideration request is. However, as I was saying earlier, due to the social media platforms, WhatsApp groups, etc., Facebook groups, of course, everybody thinks that reconsideration is a quick fix medicine and you will get a solution out of it. Unfortunately, what that does is that clogs up the pipe, clogs up the whole queue, clogs up the whole process, whereby the genuine individuals who can take advantage of the reconsideration request, unfortunately, are not going to have a chance because the processing queue is going to take too long and then they might run out of that opportunity as well. These situations have to be strategized, whether reconsideration makes sense or not. If you are inside Canada and your decision was made inside Canada, then you have a very short period of about 2 weeks to apply for a judicial review by hiring an immigration lawyer. If you're outside Canada, that period is 2 months within which you can apply for a judicial review using an immigration lawyer. And therefore, you have to be able to strategize and understand at what stage should I not consider reconsideration anymore or opt for a judicial review, or in some cases, should you first try with a reconsideration request, and if it is still denied, then go for a judicial review? Because mind you, if you have a good case and if you have everything, all your facts sorted, you did request for reconsideration, the officer still did not accept your request, it even makes for a better case for a judicial review, and this time certainly getting a decision in your favor. So I hope I've been able to explain to you what a reconsideration request is and how not to use it frivolously, and basically to be prepared, to be aware as to what needs to go in there. Always highlight the officer's concern and then the documents and the facts that you have provided in your application. Hopefully this time allaying the concerns of the officer and getting a file reopened, and in the bargain getting your application decision in a favorable manner. I wish you guys all the very best, and if you got some value out of this video, I hope you're going to like it and share it, and I shall see you on the other side. Take care.